We have this session and request Mr. Balachandran to kindly come and rise and chair the session. Sir, please. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together and then welcome Mr. Balachandran. You heard him yesterday detail about, in today, a lot of dailies today, at least I have read it in Times of India, Bangalore edition today, the details of his analysis and help that he rendered yesterday has been carried very explicitly. Thank you very much, sir. Now, it's Mr. Ricardo, Senior Policy Analyst, whom you heard in the afternoon, would continue the session now today with Incident Command System and Exercise Planning and Evaluation. Welcome, Mr. Eric.
Thank you, sir.
Over to Mr. Balachandran.
You first? All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
With his initial remark, he would start the session. Over to you, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have been instructed to chair the session. I was not prepared at all. But anyway, I spoke something about the incident command. I believe you're going to speak about the incident command?
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, that's good. Then incident command system, I had touched upon very briefly about what is being done in the United States, and I also mentioned about the history of incident command system in United States, and the Department of Homeland Security had firmed up various measures which have been tested and found very successful in various situations. So, Mr. Eric Oddo would be speaking about it, and he is incidentally working in the Department of Homeland Security in the research side. And you already heard him very well this morning, and I would request him to kindly give the presentation. Right. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, folks, you're stuck with me again. Sorry. One more presentation for the day, all right? This morning we talked about continuity of operations planning. That is the ability of an agency to recontinue its essential functions post-emergency event. Another very, very critical concept in emergency management is what I'm about to talk about. ICS, the Incident Command System. What is ICS? It is a standardized approach to incident management, okay? It enables a coordinated response among various jurisdictions and agencies, so it facilitates multi-agency cooperation and coordination. It establishes common processes for planning, organizing, and acquiring resources. And it allows for the integration of facilities, equipment, personnel, procedures, all the tangible things that need to be acquired in order to manage an incident. So the Incident Command System creates a standardized organizational framework for the actual real-time management of an ongoing emergency. Okay? This slide just talks about briefly the history and origins of the Incident Command System. It originated in Southern California in the early 1970s. There were significant wildfires, very damaging, a lot of property damage, a number of casualties. Studies determined that response problems often related to communication and management deficiencies rather than lack of resources or failure of tactics. So it wasn't the skills or the resources of first responders, it was how they were organized. ICS remedies that. 9/11 happened, and the Homeland Security Presidential Directive 5, along with the development of the National Incident Management System in the United States, mandated that all U.S. entities are trained on and utilize the Incident Command System when managing emergency events. So let's talk about what is involved in ICS. From those wildfires that occurred in Southern California in the early 70s, there were really 5 major weaknesses that were identified. They are as follows. First was lack of appropriate accountability, okay? There was not an appropriate chain of command in place. There was no standardized unity of command. Second was poor communication, okay? You had agencies and entities speaking in different languages, using different terminology. They didn't have interoperability and redundancy amongst their communication systems. One of the major weaknesses of the 9/11 response was you had police, fire, emergency medical services who couldn't communicate with one another. Third was a lack of an orderly and systematic planning process for determining objectives. Fourth, no predefined methods to integrate interagency requirements into the management structure and planning process effectively. And fifth, you had freelancing. You had individualized groups or entities showing up and working in kind of disjointed, fragmented manners, okay? ICS corrects these weaknesses based on its fundamental nature, okay? When is ICS used? Well, remember we talked about this morning that COOP planning is all hazards planning. ICS is the same thing. Regardless of the size or the scale of this or the scope of the emergency, ICS is applicable, okay? Whether it's a natural hazard, something like a weather event, fires, tornadoes, floods, ice storms, a technological hazard, some examples, dam breaks, radiological or hazmat releases, or human-caused hazards, some examples here, acts of terrorism, also with special events. Sometimes ICS is activated before an emergency even takes place as a precautionary measure. Okay? During the Obama presidential inaugurations, 2008, 2012, ICS was utilized as a preventative measure. They use it at the Olympics as well. Okay, common terminology is at the forefront of what is important in terms of ICS. Communication should use common terms or clear text. We want to avoid using things like radio codes, agency-specific codes. Acronyms are to be avoided, as well as informal jargon. Here's an example of why using plain English is imperative as opposed to acronyms. For instance, this slide represents what the acronym EMT could stand for. It could mean a laundry list of different things. Emergency medical treatment, emergency medical technician, Eastern Mediterranean time. It's a city code in California. Email money transfer. So in the chaotic aftermath of an emergency, when communication has to be succinct and clear and efficient, we can't risk having two entities not being able to communicate with one another based on an inconsistent language. So ICS fixes that. One of the most critical aspects of ICS is its command structure, okay? ICS utilizes a first on-scene structure, meaning the first responder of a scene that arrives is the incident commander until they are relieved or the incident has been declared resolved. A more qualified responder arrives. So for instance, if we're talking about a hostage situation, or maybe a fire, and a police officer is the first one on scene, they would be the incident commander until relieved by a fire department or more appropriate personnel. Two other major characteristics of an ICS framework is it allows for both a clear-cut chain of command as well as unity of command. So with a chain of command, it allows an incident commander to direct and control the actions of all personnel under his or her supervision. It avoids confusion by requiring that orders flow from supervisors. Unity of command. One of the major weaknesses pre-ICS was you had people reporting to multiple supervisors. That can create a lot of problems and a lot of miscommunication in terms of accomplishing goals and objectives. In an ICS structure, which I'm going to show you how it's laid out in a few moments, everyone reports to one supervisor. Under no circumstances would one individual be reporting to more than one person, okay? Management by objectives. Again, pre-ICS, there was no formalized process for determining the objectives of the emergency response. ICS allows for that. The three most imperative goals in an ICS response are, first, life safety, second, the stabilization of the incident, and third, preserving property. Okay? Documentation is critically important in an ongoing ICS response for legal purposes, for accountability, for after-action reports, for developing improvement plans. It's very, very important that there's a formalized procedure for tracking information and documentation. We call this an incident action plan, okay? Every incident must have an incident action plan. It specifies the incident objectives, it states the activities to be completed, it covers a specified time frame, it specifies the incident and specifies communication protocols. Just to allow you to visualize what a sample incident action plan may look like, here's one that I found online. It contains the incident objectives, a safety message for all operational personnel. It has some recommendations going forward. This is just a really concise sample of an incident action plan that might be used in a real-time ICS emergency. Sure, yeah. Let's see, it contains, number one is the name of the incident. Number two is the operational period, so the start and when the emergency ended. A list of the objectives. On here, there's 17. I can read you a couple of them. Protect the health and safety of the public and responders. Protect sensitive areas to minimize impact to the environment. Cultural. You know what? I can barely read it. I'm getting a headache from it, but. Second is the operational period. Third are the incident objectives. Fourth, I'm not sure what that was. That was left blank on the sample that I found. But fifth is a safety message for qualified so safety protocols for the people involved. The weather, 6 is the current weather. 7, any current tides or currents. So this is a maritime event probably. 8 and 9 are time of sunrise and sunset. And 9 just talks about some general annexes and appendices that are attached. And 10 is who it was prepared by. Okay? Okay. ICS organization. The ICS organization is unique but easy to understand. Very important. There is no correlation between the organization of an ICS framework and any other agencies that are involved. So if you have a police department, their organizational framework is forgotten about. It's about standardization. The ICS organization will always be the same, and I'll show you how that works in a few minutes. It eliminates confusion over position titles because, again, it's about standardization. They're all consistent with any ICS framework. You may be a director or an executive in your personal agency, but that probably will not be your title in an ICS framework, okay? The ICS uses modular organization, and again, you'll be able to visualize this in the next slide. It develops in a top-down modular fashion that is based on the size and complexity of the incident. One of the advantages of ICS is that it can be expanded and contracted efficiently based on the size and scale of the emergency. Let's see here. Okay, span of control. One of the major weaknesses pre-ICS was there was no formalized process for having an efficient span of control. It's relatively inefficient to have one person reporting to only one boss. Likewise, you don't want to have 100 people reporting to one supervisor. It results in a lack of oversight and accountability. Therefore, within ICS, there's a standardized, ideal span of control. 3 to 7 people, 5 being the ideal amount. So in an ICS event, you want to have one supervisor overseeing 3 to 7 staff members, with 5 being the ideal number. All right? Span of control. We don't want it to be excessive. We don't want it to be overly minimized. Resource management, another major critical area of ICS. This illustration just allows you to visualize the ongoing life cycle of an ICS framework. So the incident takes place, resource requirements are identified, the logistics branch, which I'll talk about in a moment, will order and acquire supplies. These supplies are mobilized, their inventories are tracked and reported. The incident ends, recovery and demobilization. Individuals are reimbursed, inventory is taken, and the life cycle continues. Okay? So a system for resource management, very critical. Okay, the next 2 slides are about ICS facilities. Remember, we don't want to use any terminology or concepts outside of this standardized language. That results in confusion. So this this very standardized, and I know I'm using the word standardized a lot, but it's really the most important word in ICS. It's why ICS was created, okay? So here are some common ICS facilities. First, and this is represented by a square with that half blue, half white, the incident command post. The incident command post is the location from where the incident commander oversees all incident operations, okay? Second is a staging area. A staging area is a temporary location where personnel and equipment are gathered while waiting to be deployed. That is distinguished with a circle with an S in it. An incident base. The incident base is the location from which primary logistics and administrative functions are coordinated, facilitated, and administered. That, on a site map, is distinguished with a B with a circle around it. A few more. A camp. A camp provides all the human needs of your personnel. Sleeping, food, water, sanitary services. That's distinguished by a C. A helibase. A helibase is a location from where helicopter-centered air operations are conducted if it's a more serious event, like putting out wildfires or search and rescue. And finally, a helispot is a more temporary location at the incident where helicopters, again, can safely land and take off. That's signified by H-3 on a site map. On September 11th, in the after-action reports of 9/11, one of the most critical weaknesses of that response was the inability of different agencies, organizations, and entities to communicate with one another in real time. There was lack of adequate interoperability on many levels. One of the main principles of ICS, integrated communications. Interoperability. If you have police, fire, EMS, public works, their radios, their communication systems can communicate seamlessly with one another. Information and intelligence management, another major component of ICS, includes operational information that may come from a variety of different sources, such as risk assessments. We talked about that earlier in the morning in COOP. That is, identifying the hazards that could affect you and then assessing how vulnerable you are to those hazards. Threats involving potential for violence. Surveillance of a disease outbreak, if that's relevant, if we're talking about some type of pandemic event. Weather forecasts. Could there be could severe weather inhibit the search and rescue operation, for instance? And finally, any relevant structural plans and vulnerabilities. Okay, so first, when people arrive on scene, and I apologize, I know this slide's a little bit wordy, the first thing that happens is dispatch and deployment. People arrive, they receive their assignments, they check in, and then the following happens. They receive a current assessment of the situation, an identification of their individualized roles and responsibilities, a description of the ICS organizational structure, which I'm going to talk about in just a second, a location of the work area, identification of break areas, procedural instructions for obtaining needed resources, operational periods, work shifts, and very, very important, any safety equipment or safety procedures or protocols that must be followed. Okay, I'm a visual person. This is how I learn and understand things. This slide will allow you to visualize how an ICS framework is coordinated. Okay, so at the top we have the incident commander. Okay, the command staff, which is right beneath the incident commander, they report directly to the incident commander. And again, this is how every ICS framework will be organized, regardless of whether it's a small-scale event or an earthquake. The public information officer, okay, they're responsible for disseminating consistent and reviewed messages to the media. The safety officer ensures that people have the adequate safety equipment, that best practices are being followed. The liaison officer will liaise with outside entities. And then you have there will always be the following 4 sections of the general staff. And I'll explain those in detail in the next slide. First, once again, the incident commander. They are a highly qualified individual trained to lead the incident response. They are specifically responsible for ensuring overall incident safety, providing information services to internal and external stakeholders, and they do this via the liaison officer, and establishing and maintaining liaison with other agencies participating in the incident. Okay, here are the 4 major ICS functions. There's always 4, no more and no less. You have operations, okay? These are your tactical boots on the ground people who are actually remedying whatever emergency has taken place. Then you have your planning section. Okay? People in planning are supporting the incident action planning process by tracking resources, collecting and analyzing information, and maintaining documentation. You have logistics. They arrange for resources and needed resources, food, water, first aids, medical supplies, to support achievement of the incident objectives. And last but not least, you have finance and administration. Any incident, you have to have all 4 sections. Monitoring costs, providing accounting services, procurement, recording hours worked, and conducting cost analyses, okay? In any event, operations, planning, logistics, and finance and administration. We talked about the command staff already. You have a PIO, a safety officer, and a liaison officer. All 3 of them report directly to the incident commander. Okay, let's just talk about each of the 4 sections specifically. Each section, the leader of each section, is known as a section chief. Okay, so regardless of what your title was in your outside career, if you are leading a section, you are referred to as a chief, section chief. So the operations section chief is the person with the greatest tactical expertise in dealing with the problem at hand. Okay? Now, within the operations section, I want to familiarize you with some important terminology. You may have task forces and you may have strike teams. The difference between a task force and a strike team is a task force has mixed resources. So it may be a combination of police, it may be a few firefighters, it may be a few emergency medical technicians working together towards a common task. A strike team consists of all the same resources. Okay, so that's the difference between a strike team and a task force. Also, if you want to break down the section further, you have groups, divisions, and branches. Groups are organized functionally. So there may be different functions within the operations section. Divisions are organized geographically. So let's say you're dealing with, let's say there's rioting in Bangalore. Okay, so there's some type of event, there's rioting breaks out. Perhaps you subdivide the city into different geographical divisions. That would be an example of using and branches oversee groups and divisions. So this is a sample operations section, just for you to be able to visualize it. So at the top, we have your operations section chief. Beneath, this is just a sample. You have 3 at the branch level underneath. You have emergency services, law enforcement, and public works. And beneath these guys, you have groups, function-based groups. Now, let's say hypothetically that the perimeter control group was divided up into an east section and a west section. Those would be divisions, okay? So, branches, groups, and divisions are the subsections of the overall operations section, all right? Next, planning. The planning section has units that are always broken down as follows. They each have a very specific but important objective. First, the resources unit, okay? They take inventory of necessary resources. They acquire new resources if need be. You have the situation unit, responsible for the collection, organization, and analysis of incident status information. So they're constantly taking stock of situational awareness, situational updates. Third, you have the documentation unit. These folks are responsible for formalizing those incident action plans that I talked about a minute ago. And fourth, the demobilization unit. You only want to be operating under an ICS framework for as long as absolutely possible. You want to demobilize as soon as it's safe, as soon as those 3 goals of life safety, stabilization of the incident, and the preservation of property have taken place. So that's planning. Logistics. Logistics can be broken down into the following 6 units. You have supplies, you have ground support, you have facilities management, you have food, got to keep your people well fed, communications, ensuring that you have adequate primary and alternative modes of communications, and sixth, medics. Do you have medical supplies, do you have EMTs, do you have first aid kits, etc. So that's how logistics is broken down. This is how finance and administration is broken down. You have a compensation and claims unit responsible for all financial concerns related from property damage, injuries, or fatalities. You have a cost unit, tracking costs, analyzing data, making estimates. You have a procurement unit responsible for financial matters concerning vendor contracts. And finally, a time unit. It's inevitable that in a ICS event, people are going to be working extra shifts, working overtime. It's imperative that that is properly tracked and coordinated. That's the responsibility of the finance and administration section. There are some scenarios where you may have unified command. Okay, so you may have multiple incident commanders based on the complexity of the event. If separate commands are used, there is danger of incident objectives being missed because 2 entities each think that the other is responsible for it. Duplication of efforts, that's inefficient, we want to avoid that. And this 3 is very important. We never want to have a scenario where there's inconsistent information being relayed to the media. It's absolutely critical in an emergency that the media is receiving consistent, vetted, and correct updates. A few unified command features. You have shared facilities, a single planning process, an integrated general staff, and a coordinated process. Resource ordering is streamlined and consolidated. So this is how you can visualize an example of what a unified command may look like. So if it's a very complex event that we're talking about that may require hazmat, law enforcement, and public works, this could just allow you to visualize how that would be consolidated into one unified command. Again, the command staff and the general staff, that all stays the same. We have one section chief for each branch, and then divisions, units, groups, as I just talked about. Okay, an emergency operations center. Very important aspect of emergency management. An Emergency Operations Center supports the on-scene response by relieving the incident commander of the burden of external coordination and securing additional resources. Most communities have in their Department of Emergency Management a fully functioning, a well-equipped EOC. I'm assuming Bangalore does as well. An EOC it's a physical location. It's staffed with personnel trained for and authorized to represent their agency or discipline. It's well-equipped with state-of-the-art communication systems, usually has multiple television monitors to track the event. It's managed through protocols, and it's applicable at different levels of government. I have a picture for you that shows a sample emergency operations center. This is one in Maryland. So you have each role and responsibility filled. You have your incident commander who is briefing the situation. In the front row are your 4 section chiefs, as well as your PIO, your liaison officer, and your safety officer. So this just allows you to visualize what an emergency operations center during an event may look like. It's also a good idea, based on the event, to have a joint information center. Okay? This is a consolidated location where representatives from the media and public information officers can meet in unison to make sure that all messages that are public are disseminated effectively and efficiently. Serves as a central point of contact for all the news media. When possible, public information officials from all participating agencies should co-locate in the Joint Information Center, and it may be established at various levels of government or at the incident site itself. Okay, so that's ICS, all right? So just to review, you have an incident commander, okay? The reason why ICS is so important is that it provides unity of command. So 5 major things, okay? Unity of command, common terminology, management by objectives, flexibility, and 5th, an established span of control, okay? Those are the 5 major reasons why ICS is so important. And just to review, all ICS response frameworks will look like this. Every single, no matter size or scale or complexity of the event, you will always have an incident commander. You will always have a command staff consisting of a PIO, a safety officer, and a liaison officer, and you will always have those 4 sections led by a section chief, okay? This is used for every incident that takes place in the United States. It's mandated by the National Incident Management System and Presidential Homeland Security Directive 5, okay? So that's ICS. The only other thing I want to talk about in this presentation are community emergency response teams, okay? Here's the definition. It's an organization of volunteer emergency workers who have received specific training in basic disaster response skills and to agree to supplement existing emergency responders in the event of a major disaster. So in a scenario where the time and the efforts of first responders are very demanding, this can provide some relief and some distribution of roles and responsibilities. It can really ease the burden on first responders. The idea of community emergency response teams originated in Los Angeles in the mid-1980s. Here are just some basic facts about what we call CERTs. How it works is a local government agency will agree to sponsor a CERT within its jurisdiction. The sponsoring agency, for example, a police department, a fire department, liaises with, deploys, and may train and supervise the training of the members of their CERT team. As people are trained and agree to join the community emergency response effort, a CERT is formed. Multiple CERTs are organized into a hierarchy of teams consistent with ICS principles. Okay? So these CERT teams utilize the same ICS framework that we just mentioned, that I just took you through. Here are some examples of the types of tasks and the types of skills that members of a CERT may undertake, okay? data gathering, basic level firefighting tasks, light search and rescue operations, damage evaluation of structures, basic levels of triage and first aid, assist in the evacuation of residents, particularly elderly folks or people who may have functional needs, and assist with setting up a neighborhood shelter. I'm sorry. Correct. So triage is the initial evaluation of the severity of someone's injuries. Okay? So if you're in an emergency room, if you're in an emergency room and you have suddenly 20 people with injuries arriving, the initial triage figures out, okay, who is in critical condition, who is in moderate condition, and who is relatively okay. So who needs attention first and foremost. So it's just a tiered system for determining the severity of the patient. The reason why it's so important and beneficial to have CERT performing these tasks is it allows professional responders to focus on more highly technical and highly skilled procedures. FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, recommends that a CERT should be 10 people large, and it should be conducted as follows. You should have a team leader. You should have a safety officer who's focusing on the safety and well-being of members. 2 people who have skills in fire suppression. 2 people who have skills in search and rescue. 2 who have skills in medical triage. And 2 that have skills in medical treatment. Okay, so this is the best practice recommendation for how a 10-person team should be constructed. Last slide. When not responding to disasters, CERTs may raise funds, engage in fundraisers for their community to raise things like funds for emergency response equipment. They may provide first aid and crowd control or other services at community events, things like athletic events, football games, county fairs, for instance. Hold planning, training, or recruitment meetings, try to get more individuals on board and involved in this very important process, and conduct or participate in disaster response exercises. Things like tabletops, drills, functional exercises, and full-scale exercises. Okay? So just to kind of review what I talked about, the incident command system, it's a standardized, formalized structure for how agencies in the United States and abroad respond and organize incident response in real time, okay? We have an incident commander at the top. We have those 4 operational pillars: operations, planning, logistics, finance. CERT stands for Community Emergency Response Team. It's designed to supplement and augment the burden faced by first responders by lightening their load, so to speak, allowing them to focus on more dangerous and critical tasks and allowing a CERT to focus on a lower priority of disaster recovery. So that's my presentation on ICS and CERT, and I'm happy to answer any questions to the best of my ability.
Just take a couple of minutes. Yesterday, I broadly touched upon the incident command system and compared to what happened in 2611. If we had an incident command system, something like that, what has been set in practice in the United States, and as I mentioned yesterday, in some form or the other, United Kingdom, New Zealand, Australia, British Columbia, Canada, and Brazil have adopted this system. There were various peculiar incidents. I mean, peculiar in the sense that because of the gravity and the surprise of 2611 attack. Number one, in this incident command system, the incident commander has the control of the resources. Yesterday I mentioned that. In other words, the resources is what? He could get the other agencies to cooperate without following the hierarchy. The man in charge of the control room was an officer of the rank of an Inspector General of Police. When he found that he couldn't control the situation, he had to ask his boss, that is the Commissioner of Police, who was not at the control room. I mean, here it will be the operation center. And then Commissioner of Police, after taking his permission, he had to ask for the Additional Chief Secretary home. Additional Chief Secretary home at that time was confined in Taj and subjected to the terrorist attack. She couldn't be contacted at all. Then he had to call the Chief Secretary. Chief Secretary was in another place, another control room, that is that emergency control room which was set up in the State Secretariat. He was sitting there. And because of this heavy load on communication, it took some time for him to get the approval of the Chief Secretary. Chief Minister was away in Kerala. And then our normal rules say that you have to go through all this hierarchy to contact the army, to contact the Navy, to contact the National Security Guard. It took about an hour. And by the time, by 11 o'clock, it was registered with the Government of India. They also had to follow certain protocol. So all these things, the net result is the resources, what he was mentioning, was delayed. And till then, the understaffed, I would say, equipped, the Bombay police had to suffer very heavy casualties. The civilians, the hotel people, as well as in Chabad House, they had to face tremendous amount of pressure and loss of lives, which could have been saved if we had an incident command system. And secondly, here one of the finest principles is if he is part of that incident command system, he does not follow his boss. Supposing he is in the police department and he is only a rank of a sub-inspector and above him is inspector, then it goes up like that. Those people, not part of the incident command system, would give him order. He is not supposed to take that thing. In Mumbai, several such incidents were noticed. For example, Kolaba inspector, he had 3 live scenes in his area. One was Leopold Cafe, second was Taj, raging, and third was Chabad House, Nariman House. And he was asked, this has gone on record. One officer of a senior person, he called him on his mobile and asked him, you go here. He says, look, I am dealing with these 3 situations and they are all asking me, please rush men here. And as I mentioned yesterday, the fire brigade, water ran dry, the Norcal ladder, had to be repaired. He was running around and then his boss got angry with him. You are not listening to me. What do you think of yourself? That will not happen here. He will not be bound by his own, in the hierarchy, whatever boss is there. He will go only by the clear-cut orders of the incident command system. So this has got a number of advantages. It may be something new in our system, but how do we manage the Kumbh Mela? It is nothing but an incident command system. There are the life-saving, the boat people, the PWD people, the health people, sanitation people, police people, everybody works in a team. If we can have that Kumbh Mela system which comes once in 12 years or whatever it is, we can as well have this here. The only thing is that our mindset has to change. Now, one of the most important things is that the terminology that is used is common. We in the police use certain terminology, in the health department something else, in the revenue and police always have been working together. So there is always a meeting of the mind because we work together in the rural areas, in the urban areas, everything. But that's not the case with the health department, municipality, fire brigade and all. We don't work every day. So you have to have that joint team, joint objectives, and then that will cut out a lot of wastage of resources. Now, another example, a simple example I'll tell you. When the senior officers were shot and they were critically injured, the police took them to the nearest hospital, GT hospital. Now, in the emergency relief which was there in the Secretariat, They knew that these doctors had all run away because they were scared of the terrorists. They all run away. There was nobody in the hospital. So these bleeding 3 senior officers and others had to be taken to the hospital where they couldn't be attended at all. And then they had to be taken to Bombay Hospital, which was functioning. So all these things can be avoided if we have one nerve center, which is the operational center, and the representative from the relief organization that is equivalent of FEMA, that is NDMA, or whatever is called in the state, he will be there, health will be there, fire brigade will be there. Each one reports to the incident commander. So this will be an excellent idea. Only thing is, we don't know. Now, since yesterday I've been asking for this booklet which was given by NDMA. I haven't still got it. I would have liked to read it to see whether it fits into the requirement of law and order. I can, since with this experience I can do it. I would request that NDMA representative to please give me, I'm going away tomorrow morning, or you can give it to Mr. Simon's office. He will send it to me. I'll be able to give some, some comments on that. Now, I would thank you very much for a very good presentation.
Thank you.
Yesterday, I broadly touched upon that, but then you have given all the entire how the system works. It is found very, very successful in these countries, not only in the United States. It has been copied, as I said, in other countries also. So, since we have the problem of megacities, we should adopt it. This is my feeling. I would now request the audience to ask questions, and he'll be happy to answer.